Hey, it's Coach Teller, and what we're about to discuss in today's video is far and away the single most important key to your long-term success as a basketball player, and it's actually the opposite of what your coaches and the media and society at large has been telling you is required for your success. And so this is really important. If there's one video that you pay close attention to, it's this one. And I want to start off by sharing something a little bit personal. So when I was in high school one summer, my coach approached me and he said something that I'll never forget. He said, "You play like you have a dark cloud over your head." And I'll never forget it. It absolutely floored me when I first heard it, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized he was right. At the time, I was always a good player, but hadn't quite broken through to being great. I was always stuck between that, 8 or 9 to 12 points per game range. I had never broken above that level. I was always in the shadow of players who I felt didn't work as hard as I did on the team. And I put this crippling pressure on myself to succeed in basketball, and as a result, I was constantly down when things weren't going my way, which is where that dark cloud came from. And most of all, I was just straight up missing the entire point of the game itself. And it wasn't until my junior season when I tore a third of the cartilage in my left hip and actually had to go in for surgery and miss the rest of that season due to that injury that I finally figured out what I had been doing wrong. Now, about that injury really quick, you might remember that Isaiah Thomas had this same injury and he's never quite come back to be the same player that he was before he had that injury. So this was a big deal. And I remember being diagnosed, having the x-ray and speaking with the surgeon and driving home from the hospital with my dad and thinking for the first time in my life, I may actually never play basketball again. Like that's a real possibility. And not to be super dramatic, but it was kind of like in that moment, my basketball life flashed before my eyes and all of the years and hours of work that I'd put into this game. And I said to myself in that moment, like, if I ever get to play again, I am going to love every last minute of it. And so I got the surgery, I sat out the season, I did the rehab, but I didn't have much time to train. And I went into the following season kind of uncertain about how my body would cooperate. I was definitely rusty. I had the sloppiest skill set that I'd had in several years because I just didn't have time to train. And I started off the season playing limited minutes. And I remember I think our third or fourth or maybe fifth game back, I scored 21 points in half the game. Okay, again, limited minutes because of my injury, 21 points. And I was all of a sudden playing in a way that I'd never played before. It was like all of the talent that was bubbling up inside of me and that had been blocked by that dark cloud over my head finally came shining through. The dark cloud lifted and I started playing the best basketball of my life after not really training at all. And it was so bizarre to me that that was the year that I finally broke through. I averaged 24 points per game. I was a first team league all-star. Our team won the city championship finally. And I even got a scholarship to play for the school that I'd grown up watching my whole life. And I was playing the best basketball of my life and finally loving every last minute of it. And it wasn't until that year that I realized when I looked back on the rest of my career, I had been playing the game kind of like, to use an analogy, it was like listening to music on fast forward just to get to the end of the song, right? When you listen to music, you listen to enjoy the music. You don't try to fast forward as quickly as you can to get there to the end before anybody else. You're meant to listen and enjoy and sing and dance. And the way that I had been playing was kind of like missing the music of the game. I was so focused on the end game, on the accolades and the recognition and the awards and the trophies and the scholarships that I missed the music. I missed the whole point of playing the game that I loved. And so it was putting really this dark cloud over my head, this ceiling that I could never break through. And so that brings us to what I consider to be, at least in the realm of basketball, the single most important law of the deep game, which is the law of mastery. And the law of mastery states, this is law number 7, by the way, the law of mastery states that the game rewards the player who needs no reward other than the game itself. Now, most players, we both know, myself included, play for the reward. And we have been almost brainwashed by society and the media and our coaches and basketball culture and culture at large that what matters is success. And our idea of success is to beat out the competition and win at all costs and collect all of these awards and be the greatest of all time and all of these things that they're nice and they're nice ideas to think about, but they're essentially missing the point. What success is simply loving what you're doing in the moment when you're doing it. And the deeper your love for what you're doing is, the more successful you are. It's nothing but that. And so if you can connect to that deeper love that you have for the game of basketball, the love that has been almost like locked in a prison for, in some cases for years, because of the need for success or so-called success and the need for achievement, if you can unlock that pure love that you have for the game again, you will start playing in a way that you have probably never experienced before. One of our players who was all-state this past season and is now going on to play college basketball, his name's Ryan Davis. And Ryan wrote this really moving email several weeks ago where he said that there were times when he literally pushed himself so hard and felt so much pressure to succeed that he felt like it would be easier just to give up and quit the game altogether and just not play anymore. And through the process of learning how to play the deep game, he reconnected to that pure love that he has for the game of basketball. And that's when he finally started playing the game the way that he knew he was always capable of, but had never quite unlocked before. Okay, so my wish for you, regardless of, even if you never use any of these other laws of the deep game, this is the one that my prayer is that you can finally reconnect to that love that you have for the game of basketball and let it come shining through you when you play. I've used Luka Doncic as an example with many of these laws because he is a player who is really good at playing the deep game. There are some areas he needs to work on, but when it comes to playing the deep game, Luka is a guy who, when he's on the floor, it's like every cell in his body is smiling, and that joy for the game comes beaming through him when he plays. Recently, I've been reading the book 11 Rings by Phil Jackson, and I came to a point just last night, actually, in the book where he talked about the 95-96 Chicago Bulls team that he coached. And he said that was probably, well, it was the best team that he'd ever coached, possibly the best team in the history of basketball, and maybe one of the best teams in the history of sports. And that Chicago Bulls team, he said, went beyond being driven by competitiveness and being driven by just wanting to achieve and beat everybody. They transcended that, and they were simply, it was very clear to Phil that they were being driven by the joy of the game itself. And so that's my invitation to you, is to reconnect to that joy and that love that you have for the game. And of course, that's a process. And like I said, in many cases, we've been brainwashed by the rest of basketball culture to approach the game in a way that's really damaging. And step one to getting that love back is to reconnect with, or I call it falling in love with, the little things again. And you know those little things. When you walk into the gym and it's completely empty and you dribble the ball and the echo bounces off the walls and you take that first shot and it rolls off your fingertips and rips through the mesh. And the feeling of waking up early and seeing the morning mist in the springtime, the early off season when you go to the court and it's totally empty and the sun's coming up and you're already sweating before anybody's awake, and the feel of the ball in your hands, the little things in the game that all of us fell in love with early on, and we've probably lost touch with over time. And so my advice to you is to just reconnect with those little things that you love about the game, and you will start to find that your love and your joy for playing the game starts shining brighter and brighter and coming through you when you play. And you will play at a level, I promise you, that goes so far beyond anything that you could ever do if you were simply focused on the rewards and the recognition and the accolades and the things that we've all been brainwashed into thinking are the important part of the game. They're not. It's the love for the game that matters. And so that is law number 7 of the deep game, the law of mastery. And all week, as I've been saying, we've been focusing on the 8 laws of the deep game. If you want to take these further, we do have a complete 8-week deep game program that I will link to in the description, or it'll be somewhere around this video in some way. You can also just go to deepgame.com and check that out. It is obviously advanced. We go for an entire week into each one of these 8 laws. And if you want to master the deep game of basketball, the part of the game that is played with the mind, then I would love to work with you inside that program. But regardless of whether you join us or not, my hope is that you, again, reconnect with that love for the game, and you will play so much better, and you will love every single moment of it, okay? So again, Deep Game program, if you want to check it out, deepgame.com. I'll be back here tomorrow to go over the 8th and final law of the deep game. So get ready for that, and I hope we see you inside the full program. But either way, we'll see you back here tomorrow for the final and the 8th law of the deep game.